And ultimately, what I decided to do was to go ahead and to take on something that had a little bit less regulation, like power paragliding. The second thing is going to be your harness and your actual paramotor. It was so neat to be able to travel around, to be able to just explore. And you know, there's a whole paragliding community. And up, I get it started, I have my throttle in my hand, and I start running up the motor. Hey guys, it's Jay Tamat and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about my power paragliding experience. I had a power paraglider. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got into it, what I loved about it, and then ultimately what happened that caused me to decide that power paragliding wasn't for me. So before we get started, if you don't mind, go ahead, like, comment, subscribe, hit that button down there because it makes my day and it really helps me out with hitting my goal of 1,000 subscribers. I started working towards power paragliding after I had already had about 25 hours logged towards my private pilot's license. I was flying a Cessna 171 and I started getting to the point where it was time for me to learn weight and balance, and it was time for me to start doing flight planning. I realized that the heavy regulation that the FAA has wasn't near as much fun as I thought it was going to be. And ultimately, what I decided to do was to go ahead and to take on something that had a little bit less regulation, like power paragliding. That started kind of my journey. As I started looking at all these different things that I could be doing, it looked like a lot of fun. So I went ahead and I sought out an instructor. I started getting my certification for power paragliding, and then I was able to actually make it all happen. The result is this. So a paraglider has a few different parts. The first part is it has the wing, which is the giant canopy that goes over you. The second thing is going to be your harness and your actual paramotor. And so the paramotor is the big fan that you strap on your back. You put that thing on your back and you connect the wing with all the different lines. The wing has probably like 80 different little tiny paracords that are attached to it. If you're not careful, you can find yourself making a rat's nest of it, which is kind of a mess to try to get yourself out of. But ultimately, the other parts that you have is inside this hand, this left hand, you're going to have your throttle. And so you'll hold on to your throttle and there's a kill button at the top. On the right side right here, you're going to have your emergency reserve. And so you would grab that emergency reserve, and anytime you need to toss it, the motion is push out, pull in, throw out. And so we practice that so many times where in the event that you had to throw your reserve, grab it, push it out, pull it in, throw it out. And then you grab your actual glider and you'd start reeling it in as quick as possible, because you can't have two parachutes open. And so if the reserve is open, you're going to want to try to get the other one out of the way as quick as possible. But you also have to be able to be prepared to brace for impact, because the reserve parachute doesn't have a way to be able to prevent you from hitting the ground really hard. So it's going to be just kind of part of it. Fortunately, I never had to use my reserve. So here's how you do it. You'd lay out your wing behind you. You'd go ahead, you'd get all of the cords in your hands. You'd make sure you're all hooked up, you do your final check, have your throttle. All right, you'd go ahead, you'd get it started, and then you'd start to run. And as you're running, this wing starts coming up behind you, and you start running and you pull the gas, and then push the throttle. And so the throttle starts pushing you forward, and you just keep running your feet, running your feet, running your feet. Even when you start to feel your feet lifting off the ground, you just keep running until you're about 10 feet off the ground. And then you kind of scooch back into your seat. You check your wing to make sure that it looks good. I would always put down my visor, and then you're holding on to the two toggles. And the two toggles, this one, if you pull this way, you go this way. If you pull on this one, you go that way. And then as you're landing, if you pull down at the same time, it prevents you from hitting the ground a little bit harder. It gives you a little bit more lift. It was so neat to be able to travel around, to be able to just explore. And you know, there's a whole paragliding community. Power paragliding is apparently a really popular sport all around the world. The first time I was exposed to power paragliding, I was climbing a glacier in Iceland. And I'll tell you, it was a pretty exhausting glacier to climb. I finally get to the top and I see these power paragliders flying around. And I'm like, that's the way to do it. I don't think I ever need to climb a glacier again. I think I just need a power paramotor and I need to go flying over the glacier. So here's what happened. What got me out of power paragliding was a mistake that I made that could have been detrimental, but fortunately it wasn't. What happened was that one spring, I decided to go ahead and get my paramotor out for the first time that year. I got it all out, I checked everything up and whatnot. I put it on my back, I took my hat, tossed it over there so it wouldn't get sucked into this big fan. And then I go ahead and I run it up, I get it started, I have my throttle in my hand, and I start running up the motor. And the motor gets to about 8,000 RPMs. And all of a sudden, before I know it, bang! This this loud noise happens and I fall backwards. I'm covered in gas and oil and I immediately kill it as quick as I possibly can. I sat there on the ground for a moment and I looked around and I'm like, all right, I think I'm okay. So I unhook myself, I start getting out of my harness and whatnot, and then all of a sudden I find, as I walk around the back, that my propeller hit my gas tank. My gas tank was pushed out back just a little bit too far, and my propeller ultimately hit it. It caused wobbling and immediately catastrophic failure. My gas tank was almost completely destroyed. It was all eaten up, and the propeller hit my cage, which was the only thing protecting me from the propeller. It broke my motor mounts, and half of my propeller went 70 feet that way, and the other half of my propeller went about 150 feet that way. You know, as much as I'm ashamed to admit it, because I was on the ground and I was just getting my paramotor ready, I wasn't wearing a helmet. You know, now that I've stopped power paragliding, it's not that I was afraid of the heights. It was that I don't feel like I should have a propeller a foot away from my head. I feel like it was really fortunate that I was okay, but I definitely could have been injured a lot more. I guess I just take my my blessings there and appreciate the fact that I wasn't hurt, but that was a poor decision on my part. Whenever you're talking about aviation, you're talking about stuff like this, you can't make poor decisions like that. That's what gets you killed. My flight instructor always said, Jay, there's bold pilots and there's old pilots, but there's no bold old pilots. And he's right. He's an old pilot, and he's not necessarily a bold pilot, but that's probably to his benefit. You know, I decided that I was going to step out of power paragliding, and that if I did want to pursue any other form of aviation, that being behind an engine block and not having a propeller a foot away from my head was probably in my best interest. That's kind of my story of why I got into power paragliding, how I got into it, and ultimately why I got out of it. It was a great time in my life. I loved doing it. It was one of the coolest things that I've ever had the experience to do. But I'll say, in hindsight, there's a few things I would have done a little bit differently. And one of those is follow my own safety checklist that I have. And so, if this is a sport that you're looking to get into, I absolutely recommend it. But when you have a checklist of the different things you need to be doing every time, don't just assume you can just go do it, because it's probably not the best thing to do. Alright guys, that just about wraps it up. Thanks so much for taking time to watch my channel. If you don't mind, please go ahead, hit that like button, comment, and subscribe, because it makes my day and it really helps me towards getting my 1,000 subscribers. Power paragliding was absolutely awesome. It was the thrill of a lifetime, and it's something that I'll never forget. But it's probably not something we need to do again. So, thanks again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.